I escaped the hardest prison ever constructed in all of human history. One of my friends tracked my logout position on our SMP server and he built this bedrock prison around me, and if I ever wanted to keep playing, I would have to escape it. So I logged on a wooden slab floating in the air in a room that looked straight across a corridor, but the gap across the corridor was way too big to jump past. I noticed some string on the floor and there was a hole in the ceiling, but with no apparent way to get up there, I jumped down. The room had windows through which I could see the rest of the server outside. Across the hallway I could see a tripwire hook set up linked to a dispenser, but I had no idea how to get over there yet, so I didn't even think about it. I snuck over the edge and had a very good idea. I used F5. Using F5 gave me a whole new perspective and I was able to see a hopper I couldn't have seen before. Inside of it there was 4 dirt. This easily let me cross the gap into the next room. Upon crossing the tripwire I was splashed with jump boost, but I wasn't sure why yet. In the next room I saw an oak log in a glow item frame, but I didn't want to break it yet. Through a hole in the wall I could jump up and see to the next room with a sign that I couldn't read yet since the text was too far away to load in. I looked around the room in F5 and I saw a dropper in the ceiling with a button next to it, but I had no way to activate it. I went back to the start of the room and I opened the dispenser, and I saw that it had 3 sticks and 3 string in it. So I took these from the dispenser and then destroyed it to see if there was anything behind the dispenser. Behind it was a hopper with a bunch of arrows in it. So I took them and I did the only logical thing. Crafted a bow. Without thinking I shot the oak log from the item frame, which dropped and it fell out of my reach. So I started panicking because in 5 minutes the item would despawn and I'd be trapped there forever. I remembered the dropper in the ceiling and shot the button next to it, and I prayed something useful would drop out. A fishing rod fell towards the dropper and I breathed a sigh of relief as I fished the oak log towards me. Then I crafted some ladders and I escaped the second room. Entering the third room, I was faced with a really long lava moat, and I could now read that the sign across the room said exit. Was I really this close already? Next to where I entered the room was a double chest full of boats, so I broke the double chest and cleaned up my inventory a bit. Looking around the room in F5, I spotted a hopper in the wall that was out of my reach. So I used the chest blocks to pillar up to it and pulled out a splash potion of fire resistance. Taking a leap of faith, I jumped through the lava and fell down into another room. This fourth room had a long platform of netherrack that was permanently on fire with the exit just across it. I was a bit disappointed that the exit in the last room turned out to be alive, but I wasn't really surprised since that would make the whole thing way too easy, and honestly I should have known better. So I wasn't sure what to do since I couldn't just run through the fire without burning. I looked around in F5 and I spotted a hopper in the middle of the fire that was obscured almost entirely by the smoke particles. So I reached to the fire and grabbed the contents of it, a water bucket. Using this I watered out all the fire and proceeded to the other side. At the end of the room there was a sign that told me to drop all my items, so I did so, and looked down at the hole in the floor. It led all the way to the void. I could see in the wall there was a hole, which I assumed was the entrance to the next room. I could also see 3 hoppers in the wall. Each of them contained another hopper, which when placed contained another hopper, which when placed contained honey blocks. So I had to honey block clutch into the hole in the wall. Skillfully I did so, and I made my way into room 5. This room was easily the most complex. I was greeted by a chest with a button and a book and quill in it, and there was some lava in the room also behind it. The book and quill seemed to contain a riddle of sorts involving coordinates, so I quickly pieced together that the riddle was telling me where I had to place the button, so I began to dissect it line by line. Take the chest's location as your journey start. I assumed that this meant start with the coordinates of the chest itself. Without asking why, add the number from your textual heart. The first part of this line told me that there was something to do with the Y coordinate. The number from my textual heart can only mean one thing: 3. I knew this because people text hearts using a less than sign on the number 3, so I added 3 to the chest's Y coordinate. X marks the spot of lots of fun. The most basic equation entails 1 plus 1. Obviously, this meant that I had to take the X coordinate and add 1 plus 1 to it, so I added 2 to the chest's X coordinate. Now of course, who could leave out the Z? Plus 2, but not before a hand times 3. So now I was manipulating the Z coordinate. A hand times 3 confused me a little bit, but I realized that it must have meant 5 since that's how many fingers are on a hand. You could have done this all along, however, incorrectly order the operations or your answer will be wrong. I'm glad I read this part before doing the last part's calculations, as it told me to do the math incorrectly on purpose. So I did the addition and multiplication left to right without regard for the order of operations. One final time we manipulate the Z, take your most negative emotion and combine it with 63. This section was trivial. The negative emotion part obviously implied subtraction, so I subtracted 63 from the Z I got in the last part. With that, the riddle was solved and I had a new set of coordinates. I followed them to the block that was at those coordinates, placed the button on it, and pressed it. A jingle played with some text appearing that told me I was doing well, before giving me a bow. After this, I noticed the exit to the room, which I didn't notice earlier, covered by a netherite block which was impossible to break with just my fist. I found another room with a slime block piston mechanism and a chest across a gap that was too large to jump. I knew this must have been a slime launcher, so I stood by it, pressed the button, and was launched across the gap. The chest had an arrow in it, which I took, and then I did the slime launcher again, just for fun because it's cool, and then I left the room. The next challenge in the room entailed the lava and the candles nearby. I knew candles can melt ice, and since the candles in the room were on top of ice, I assumed that that's what I had to do to progress. But how could I light the candles? I thought for a few minutes and then realized, firing an arrow through the lava will turn it into a flame arrow, which can light candles. It took me a few tries, but I eventually shot the arrow through the lava onto the candles, lighting them, and soon after melting the ice. I then broke the candles and swam through the now open passageway. There was a tunnel with a ladder in it, which I climbed. Upon reaching the end of the tunnel, there was a hole in the floor leading back to the room I was just in. I dropped down and then found a hopper with an efficiency 5 netherite pickaxe in it. So I took the pickaxe, mined the netherite block, and exited the room. Through the door there was a water elevator leading me up to a small room with a chest in it. Chests contain a looting 3 netherite sword and 4 enderman spawn eggs. I assumed this meant I had to kill an enderman for a pearl, so I did that and looked around the room for a clue as to what my next move should be. I found a sign of some arrows pointing to the corner above them. I assumed this meant I had to pearl through the corner and glitch through the wall. With no other ideas, I threw my pearl and successfully glitched through the wall. This new room was covered in buttons and had 2 signs and a hole in the floor. I walked over to the signs which told me to grab a bucket from the first room that I missed from the first room, but I don't think the bucket was actually there before. I think that it was just trying to gaslight me into thinking that I missed it. So I dropped back down to the first room and did so. Then I jumped down into a single block of water at the bottom and filled up my bucket. With this, I was able to climb back up to the main room. Then I broke the windows and used my water to escape through the hole. I gently floated down the stream to the ground below, and with that, I had just escaped the hardest Minecraft prison ever built. Bye! Thank you for watching, and make sure to check that you are subscribed.